Hey everyone, David Aragona here, taking a look at one of the undercard stakes on Saturday at Parx, Pennsylvania Derby Day. Race 8 is the Grade 3 Turf Monster, going 5 furlongs on the turf, we hope. There is a lot of rain predicted in the East Coast area, really from New York City down to Pennsylvania on Saturday. So we'll see if this race actually stays on the grass, but it is carded for turf. 12 runners enter within the main body of the field as we take a look at the field for this race, with 3 on the also eligible list. Now, there are no MTOs in this race if it does come off the turf, but it does feel like a few that are entered for turf would be likely to stay in if the race does get rained off the turf. I think the one that jumps off the page the most is the number 1 Baron, who feels like he was entered more so for the dirt than the turf. But if this race does stay on the turf, the number 4 Roses for Deborah is going to be a handful against this field. This filly will be trying males for the first time, but she's stepping up, having won all 4 of her turf starts and switching into the Christophe Clement barn. And this is going to be a significant trial for her as she potentially preps for a start in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. But we'll see if she's able to get in this start on the turf on Saturday, as it looks pretty dicey with the weather forecast. Let's take a look at the Time Formulas pace projector for this race to see how this field could sort itself out in the early stages. And there is a lot of speed signed on, especially if this race stays on the grass. It feels like a lot of these runners want to be forwardly placed. The number 2, Nobody Listens, is shown on a clear lead on the Time Formulas pace projector, but there are plenty of runners in behind him who have intentions to make the front end in here, including the number 8, All That Magic, another female in this race that has shown a lot of speed in her prior starts. The number 10, Talented Man, who's always involved in the pace. And even the long shot, like the number 12, Belt Parkway, has speed. The number 6, Just Jeremy, does his best running when he's forward. So this could be a pace that really heats up. And even though it's just 5 furlongs, that could really suit a horse like the number 4, Roses for Deborah, who's got a big late kick on her. And she does get that Time Form US late pace flag, indicating she has the highest late pace rating in this field. Let's go through this field in post position order. We'll begin with the number 1, Barrett. And like I mentioned at the top, kind of feels like this horse is entered as sort of a MTO, even though he's not entered explicitly as an MTO. He's never raced on the turf. He's kind of been a stalwart of the Parx Dirt Sprint division over the past several years. He's really solid, shows up with some top efforts, especially when the track comes up wet. He's 4 for 6 on wet going and seems to really move up on some off tracks. So he would be pretty happy if this race got rained off the turf. The one reservation with him is he does have a tendency to break a step slowly, so the rail post position could be a hindrance even if this race does come off the grass. The number 2 is Nobody Listens. Let's take a look at his last race when he was a winner of the Parx Dash. This was a smaller field. It's just beating 7 rivals on this occasion and not really facing a rival as tough as Roses for Deborah. But I just like this horse's versatility. He's got enough speed to go to the front, and he was that horse shown leading on the pace projector. But we also see on this replay that he's capable of coming from off the pace. He sat in behind 3 runners early, came around them at the top of the stretch, and even though he's getting bumped outwards in the middle of the stretch, he's still able to get up for the victory that day. That was his 3rd win in a row on his 2nd different surface. He's a horse that's actually won on all 3 surfaces, synthetic, turf, and dirt. So he feels like one that would be just fine if this race comes off the turf, but he's also competitive on the grass. So just a contender no matter the conditions on Saturday. The number 3 is Smooth B, and he's a horse that has never won on the turf. He's actually over 13 on the surface. He's run okay on it a few times, including last time when he arguably should have been unsaddled in the winner's circle on August 21st at Parx. He seemingly had plenty of run in behind horses coming to the top of the stretch, but got sort of blocked in the pocket, had to wait, come around rivals, and just ran out of ground once Michael Sanchez finally got him into the clear that day. That was a decent effort, but now he's stepping up to face tougher company because he would have just barely beaten Talented Man that day, and I think Talented Man, another horse that we're going to talk about a little bit later, might have his work cut out for him in this race as well. So at least Smooth B is going to be a price, but he's going to have to work pretty hard if he's to achieve his first victory on the turf against this field. The number 4 is Roses for Deborah. Let's take a look at her most recent start in the Smart and Fancy at Saratoga. Now, like I said, she is beating fillies in this race. She is obviously a filly meeting the males in this turf monster, and she's never run against males before, but she is running speed figures that suggest she is going to be awfully competitive, if not the horse to beat in this race. She has a versatile running style. Like I said, she can come from off the pace, but she also possesses the tactical speed to be fairly close when they want her to be, like she was too back in the Caress, where she stalked a slower pace and still was able to produce that electrifying late kick to win going away. I mean, she has won all 4 of her turf sprints for Christophe Clement by open lengths, 2.5 lengths or more. That's dominance in turf sprinting when you're able to win by that kind of margin. So stepping up against this field, and really it might not be that much of a step up just given the kind of fields that she's faced against the females on turf recently. So she is very much the one to beat if this race stays on the grass. The number 5 is Determined Kingdom, and not too much to knock about this horse's recent turf form. He's won 2 of his last 3, all at Colonial Downs, was beaten by a horse 2 back, an Olympic runner who might not be good enough to beat a horse like Roses for Deborah in this spot, but I did like Determined Kingdom's last race, when I thought he was pretty gritty to hold on by a neck after putting away some pace rivals, holding off the closers that day. The pace isn't color-coded as being fast in Timeform US, but when you watch the race, it did feel like one that was flowing more towards the closers, and he still was able to hold on. He's going to have to improve from a speed figure standpoint because his top recent number of 106 is just not going to cut it against this field, but at least he's in good form right now. And we know that he's got some versatility in these turf sprints. The number 6 is Just Jeremy. He was actually competing in that race we just watched in the Parx Dash, where he was second behind Nobody Listens, but he was actually a disqualified second. He was placed 3rd that day. He was the one that was drifting out in the middle of the stretch, causing some problems for Yes, I Am Free between horses and also for Nobody Listens, who eventually got by him at the end. Just Jeremy is a really fast horse. He's one that would be content to get the lead in this race. It remains to be seen if he'll actually be fast enough to do so. He's definitely doing well right now. He ran really well 2 back behind Biz Buzz in that optional claiming race at Monmouth to earn a career best up to that point, 111 Timeform US speed figure. So 2 career tops in a row for this guy, but he could have a tough trip coming to him if this stays on turf with so much speed signed on. The number 7 is Surprise Boss. He is one of the long shots in this race and just feels like a horse that's going to have to turn around his form. He was no match for Nobody Listens and Just Jeremy last time in that Parx Dash. He ran surprisingly well off the layoff and off a trainer switch on dirt at the start of the year, but just hasn't really been competitive in most of his starts since then, so feels like an ambitious spot for Surprise Boss. The number 8 is All That Magic. Let's take a look at her most recent start when she was a winner of a stakes event at Monmouth against her own gender. She is another filly facing the males in this race. And just like Roses for Deborah, she is undefeated on the turf, 4 for 4 on this surface, the same career record on grass as Roses for Deborah. She has not won her races against as tough competition as Roses for Deborah has, though she was beating a common rival with that horse and Trained Artemis last time. All That Magic just had to work harder to beat that rival, only winning by a nose over Trained Artemis in that race that we just watched. She's got a lot of early speed, and I think the game plan with her, if this stays on the turf, is just going to be to blast off and try to beat those rivals to her inside to the front end, because she does do her best running when she is able to make the early lead. And given the fact that this is just 5 furlongs, getting to the front is usually an advantage in these kinds of races. So we'll see if All That Magic is able to take them all the way, but she does have some competitive speed figures and is going to be a better price than that other filly drawn to her inside. The number 9 is Boats A Rockin', and he is another horse that has a lot of early speed, though that could be a problem for him because he just doesn't feel like he's as naturally fast as some of those other speeds that we've been talking about, drawn to his inside, that appear to have a little bit more quality. He was unable to make the lead last time in that Parx Dash, finishing behind Nobody Listens. So he's going to have to really reverse his form from that day if he's going to be competitive against this field. He was second in the Turf Monster last year, but that was a weaker edition of this race and just feels like he might not be in the same form in 2023. The number 10 is Talented Man. Let's take a look at his most recent start against Stakes Company at Parx. He was beating Pennsylvania breds this day, and you'll note the horse we just talked about earlier, Smooth B, is the one that's getting that trip in behind in the pink cap. He's the one that has to alter course in mid-stretch, but take nothing away from Talented Man. He sustained some early pressure from a rival to his outside, put that one away, and still is able to hold off a good horse in Witty to the wire, battling on gamely to get his head in front at the finish line. He's won 3 of his last 4 starts, 2 of which have come on the turf. This is just a step up in class for him, and his 104 top Timeform US speed figure is inferior to some of the others in this race. So he's a horse that I think will be a price. He's likely to drift up off that 6-1 morning line on the turf. Just feels like he's going to need to improve to beat Roses for Deborah and some others. And then to the outside, we've got a couple of runners that are trying turf for the first time, including number 11, 5 Dreams. He is a horse who will be making his turf debut in the 35th start of his career, so it's taken a long time to get this horse on the turf, and he's coming off a layoff into this race, and his trainer, Miguel Rodriguez, just isn't a trainer that really runs horses off layoffs very often. I was looking up stats in Formulator, and in a very large sample, he's only run 12 horses off 60-plus day layoffs in the past 5 years, and he's 0 for 12 with one hitting the board with that move. So maybe not a great sign this horse is coming off a break, though he is by Cinco Charlie, who is an little known sire, but a sire that actually has deceptively high percentages on the turf. He's winning with 17% of his turf starters overall, and 17% is specifically in turf sprints. A little turf pedigree on the dam side, but this horse would need to improve a little bit getting onto the turf to be competitive with this field. And then on the outside, the number 12, Belt Parkway, who's going to be a big long shot in this race if it stays on the turf. Just inferior based on form. He'll be trying the grass for the first time, and there is pedigree here. He's by Mendelssohn, a solid turf influence. The dam has produced one turf winner. Some others have also handled the turf without winning over it. So there's pedigree for this horse to move up on the turf, but he would have to move up a lot to be competitive with the field at this level. So let's throw out my picks for this race, and I put the number 4, Roses for Deborah, on top. If this race stays on the turf, I think she's going to be awfully tough to beat. If the race comes off the turf, I think the number 2, Nobody Listens, is going to be tough, along with the number 1, Baron. But just given the fact that Baron has drawn the rail with some of those gate issues that he sometimes has, I think Nobody Listens going the 5 furlong distance could be getting the right trip just to his outside. So kind of preferring Nobody Listens on the dirt, and the number 4, Roses for Deborah, on the turf in the Turf Monster on Saturday at Parx. Good luck for playing the races this weekend.